I stood in a kitchen that cost more than my entire childhood home, adjusting the silver for our 20th anniversary. Then my phone buzzed against the marble. It was a text from Ethan containing exactly 12 words. Before I could even process the shock, a second notification flashed. Access to our joint accounts and credit cards was denied. He had not just filed for divorce, he had executed a financial kill switch. My name is Camille Hartwell. I stood in the center of a kitchen that had been featured in architectural magazines, adjusting the placement of a single silver fork. Tonight marked 20 years of marriage to Ethan Rowe. The air smelled of rosemary and expensive beef. A dinner prepared with the precision of a surgeon. Everything was perfect. Everything was a lie. The phone on the marble island did not ring. It vibrated once, a short, sharp pulse that signaled a text message. I wiped my hands on a linen towel and picked it up. The screen displayed the sender, Ethan. The message was 12 words long. I am not returning. We are done. My attorney will call you. I stared at the screen. My heart did not pound. My breath did not hitch. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me, like the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. Before I could even unlock the phone to reply, a cascade of notifications flooded the screen. Alert, joint checking access suspended. Alert, American Express Platinum card deactivated. Alert, security credentials for the home network updated. He had not just left me. He had executed a kill switch. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision born of a midlife crisis. This was a tactical strike, planned and scheduled like a product launch for his company. Kestralark Ledger Works. My phone rang then, a number I did not recognize. I slid my thumb to answer and brought the device to my ear. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Then, a soft, low laugh. It sounded wet and cruel. Happy anniversary, Cammy. The line went dead. My hand tightened around the phone. Cammy. Ethan was the only person who called me that. The woman on the phone knew exactly who she was calling, and she knew exactly what was happening to my life in real time. I placed the phone back on the counter. I did not cry. I did not throw the expensive crystal wine glass against the wall. I walked over to the wolf range and turned the dials to the off position. I took the roasting pan out of the oven and dumped the entire meal into the trash. I washed the pan. I dried it. I was not cleaning up dinner. I was sanitizing a crime scene. Once the kitchen was spotless. I walked into the study. I sat down at my personal laptop, not the one connected to the family cloud, but the one I kept offline most of the time. I booted it up and navigated past the family photo albums and the tax documents. I went straight to a folder buried deep in the system directory, labeled with a name designed to be ignored. System cache, do not open. I clicked it. The screen filled with files. 6 months of data. There was a timeline spreadsheet color-coded by date and location. There were photographs of bank transfer confirmations. There were the receipts from a resort in Sandbar Key, Florida, for a couple's retreat that I had definitely not attended. And there was the photo that had started it all, taken from a burner phone I found taped behind the tool chest in the garage. A digital note titled Exit Plan Camille. I read the bullet points on that note every day to keep my focus sharp. Isolate assets, discredit stability, force signature before Monday. Monday. Why Monday? A notification banner slid onto my screen from Ethan's work email, which I had mirrored months ago. Reminder, Q3. Upload window begins tonight. Secure server access open. I froze. Of course. Kestralark was a fintech giant. They were about to upload their quarterly audit results to the board and the external auditors. The window for data entry was tonight. I looked back at my phone. The 12 harsh words from my husband still glowed on the screen. He thought I was the blind-sided wife, crying in her empty kitchen, panic dialing a lawyer who would not answer. He thought I was a victim. I opened a new message window addressed to him. I typed exactly 7 words. I understand. Enjoy your night. Open this. I hovered my finger over the send button, but not yet. I needed to attach the file that would turn this from a domestic divorce case into a federal investigation. I dragged the PDF from the hidden folder into the attachment box. I looked at the file name one last time before I released the nuclear option. I whispered into the empty room. Happy anniversary. Ethan. I pressed send. People often wonder how a woman trained to spot the smallest irregularity in a corporate ledger could miss the rot in her own marriage for 2 decades. The answer is simple. I was not looking at the data. I was looking at the dream. Before I was Mrs. Ethan Rowe, the silent ornament of high society fundraisers, I was Camille Hartwell, Senior Risk Control Specialist at Granite Pier Compliance. My job was to tear apart financial statements and find the lies buried in the footnotes. I was famous for it. I was known as the woman who could find a single fraudulent expense in a stack of paperwork 3 feet high. When I met Ethan, he was not a CEO. He was a man with a dazzling smile, a terrifyingly ambitious PowerPoint presentation, and a mental list of people he needed to use to climb the ladder. I was on that list, though I did not know it then. For the first 5 years of our marriage, I paid off his student loans. I paid the health insurance premiums. I paid the rent on our cramping apartment in the city while he built Kestrel Arc. It is not me mooching off you. Babe, he used to say, kissing my forehead as I signed another check for the electricity bill. It is. It is an investment in our future empire. You will see. I believed him. I invested everything. When Kestrel Arc prepared for its initial public offering, Ethan did not explicitly ask me to quit my job. He was far too subtle for that. He simply made it impossible for me to stay. There were sudden dinner parties for potential investors that required 3 days of planning. There were impromptu trips to Silicon Valley where he needed me to charm the wives of venture capitalists. He crafted a narrative where my career was a hindrance to our success. He needed a CEO's wife, not a compliance officer. So, I stepped down. I became the coordinator of his soft power. I managed the galas, the charity auctions, and the seating charts. I decided who sat next to whom to ensure the capital flowed into Kestrel Arc's accounts. I was good at it. I was efficient. The first hairline fracture appeared 3 years ago at the National FinTech Awards. Ethan won the Innovator of the Year title. I stood by the stage, smiling until my cheeks ached, waiting for the moment he would acknowledge the partner who kept his life running. He stood at the podium and thanked his co-founders. He thanked his investors. He even thanked his executive assistant for organizing his calendar. He did not say my name, not once. Later that night, in the back of the limousine, I asked him about it. The silence stretched for a mile before he finally looked up from his phone. Camille, honestly? Look, this is a business event, he said, his voice carrying a hint of condescension, as if explaining gravity to a toddler, mentioning domestic stuff. Mentioning you. It makes me look weak, like I depend on my wife. Investors want a leader, not a family man. I swallowed the hurt. I told myself that successful men were complicated, that the world of high finance required certain sacrifices. I normalized the disrespect. That blindness lasted until exactly 6 months ago. I was in the study, organizing the tax documents, when Ethan left his phone on the desk while he went to shower. It buzzed. I glanced over, expecting a work email. Instead, I saw a text chain with a contact saved only as D. Knox. The message read, "Are you sure she won't ask the questions about the transfer?" Ethan's reply was already there. Sent 2 minutes prior, Camille runs in the background. As long as the credit cards work, she is happy. She stopped looking at the details 10 years ago. I stared at those words. Runs in the background, like an outdated operating system, like furniture. In that moment, I did not scream. I did not storm into the bathroom and demand an explanation. The emotion simply evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. The wife died in that chair, and the risk control specialist came back to life. I realized I had violated the first rule of my old profession: never trust the client's word. Always verify the data. I put the phone down exactly where he had left it. I walked out of the room. I did not confront him. Instead, I went to the basement and dug out my old heavy-duty laptop. I stopped being his partner and started being his auditor. And if there is one thing Ethan forgot about me, it is that I never close a file until I find every single error. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I reverted to the person I was 15 years ago. I sat on the floor of the living room with a 24-month history of our finances downloading onto a thumb drive. I did not use the wireless laser printer in Ethan's office because that would leave a digital footprint on the cloud server he controlled. I dug out an old, wired inkjet printer from the closet, the kind that groaned with every line it printed. I needed hard copies. I needed evidence that existed in the physical world. By 3 in the morning, the floor was covered in paper. I highlighted every transaction that looked benign on the surface but smelled wrong to a trained nose. There was a recurring payment to an entity called Knox Meridian Consulting. It started small, just a few $100s here and there, but then the amounts climbed. $5,000, $12,000. The dates were the giveaway. Every large payment occurred exactly 3 days before the end of a fiscal quarter. I picked up my burner phone and dialed the number for the resort in Sandbar Key, Florida, listed on one of the invoices. It was 4 in the morning there, but the night desk would answer. I cleared my throat and pitched my voice an octave higher, adopting the harried tone of an overworked assistant. "Hi, this is Sarah from Mr. Rowe's accounting team. I am so sorry to bother you, but I have a discrepancy on the folio from last month. I show a charge for the couple's spa package, but my records are incomplete." The clerk typed for a moment. "I see the charge here. Ma'am, the Sunset Serenity package for 2. "Right. Thank you. And just for our tax compliance, I need to confirm the name of the second guest. Was it Mrs. Rowe?" "No, ma'am," the clerk said, helpful and oblivious. "The second guest is listed as Delilah Knox." I thanked him and hung up. My hand did not shake. Delilah Knox, Knox Meridian Consulting. Ethan was not just sleeping with her. He was paying her through our family limited liability company. He was mixing marital assets with his affair partner's business. In the world of forensic accounting, this was sloppy. It was arrogant. I walked out to the garage. I knew Ethan kept secrets in the places he thought I would never look. He assumed I was too busy arranging flowers to look behind the heavy snap-on tool chest he hadn't touched in a decade. I ran my hand along the back of the metal cabinet until my fingers brushed against tape. I pulled it loose. It was a cheap smartphone. I tapped the screen. The battery icon showed 11%. A single notification sat on the lock screen. Received 2 hours ago. Don't let her see the Q3 file. I did not unlock it. I did not try to guess the passcode. That would tamper with the digital evidence. Instead, I took my own phone and photographed the device, the serial number on the back, and the residue of the duct tape on the tool chest. I documented the chain of custody just as I would have for a federal audit. I waited until 7 in the morning to call Sloan Merritt. She was the best divorce attorney in the state, a woman who ate unfaithful billionaires for breakfast. I told her to bring Miles Corbin. Miles was a forensic accountant who could read a balance sheet like it was a crime novel. They arrived at 8. We sat at my kitchen table, the piles of paper between us. Miles scanned the highlighted payments to Knox Meridian and then cross-referenced them with the public quarterly earnings reports of Kestrel Arc. He looked up, his face pale. "Camille, this is not just embezzlement. This is round-tripping. Explain it to me," I said, though I already suspected the answer. "Ethan sends money from your family accounts to Knox Meridian for fake consulting services," Miles said, tapping the paper. 48 hours later, Kestrel Arc records a spike in revenue from a third-party partner. He is using your family money to inflate his company's revenue right before the quarterly reports. He is pumping the stock price with his own cash. Sloane was reading a printout I had recovered from the system cache of the phone. Her jaw tightened. "It gets worse," she said. "Look at this note file. It is titled Exit Plan Camille." She slid the paper across the marble. I read the bullet points. Stage 1. Isolate from social circle. Stage 2. Plant rumors of nervous breakdown. Stage 3. Force signature on separation agreement before Monday. Why Monday, I asked. Because Monday is the investor roadshow, Miles said. He needs the books to look clean and his personal life to look stable before he sells the next tranche of stock. If you don't sign by Monday, he can't sell. I looked at the date on the calendar. Today was Friday. He was not just leaving me. He was planning to declare me insane so he could cash out. He wants a war, I said quietly. He thinks he is fighting a housewife. Camille. Sloane started, her voice full of warning. "No," I said. He forgot who he married. "I am not a housewife, Sloane. I am the compliance officer, and I just found a major violation. I walked into a small regional bank 3 towns over, a place where no one knew the name Ethan Rowe. I opened a checking account using my maiden name, Camille Hartwell. I transferred exactly $9,500 from our joint savings. It was a calculated sum. It was enough to book a hotel and hire movers, but just under the $10,000 limit that would trigger an automatic federal currency transaction report. I was not stealing. I was packing a survival kit. That afternoon, I sat in a glass-walled office at a mid-tier compliance firm. The hiring manager, a young man who looked like he had not yet started shaving, looked at my resume with skepticism. "Mrs. Rowe, you have a 15-year gap on your CV," he said, tapping the paper. "The regulations have changed since you left. Technology has changed." I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the table. "I have not been out of the game," I said, my voice steady. "For 15 years. I have been living inside the world you are trying to regulate. I know how the wives of CEOs spend money that does not exist. I know how charity galas are used to wash reputation risks. You have algorithms to find patterns. I have intuition born from silence. I know exactly how powerful men hide their dirt because I have been the one sweeping it under the rug. He hired me on the spot. My next call was to the bursar's office at the university in New England, where my daughter, Madison, was a sophomore. Madison was 19 and innocent. I used the last of an old inheritance from my grandmother to prepay her tuition for the next year. Ethan could freeze my cards, but he could not repo her education. I needed to know she was safe in her dorm room before the war started. Later, I met Sloane in a park, leaving our phones in our cars to avoid geo-tracking. "Do not touch the Kestralark servers," Sloane warned, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "I mean it, Camille. If you hack into his work email, anything you find is fruit of the poisonous tree. The judge will throw it out, and Ethan will sue you for violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. I won't hack him. I promised. I don't need to. I just need to show the board where to look." I went to the public library and used a terminal in the back corner. I created a new, encrypted email account. I did not upload the raw bank statements I had found. That would look like theft. Instead, I typed up a document I called the index. It was a roadmap. It listed dates, transaction amounts, and corresponding cross-references to Delilah's travel itinerary. It was a summary that proved the building was burning without me having to admit I was holding the matches. When I got home, the house smelled of lilies. Ethan was there, early. He had opened a bottle of vintage red wine and was smiling like the man I fell in love with 2 decades ago. "I was thinking," he said, pouring me a glass. "For our anniversary, maybe we should finally take that trip to Italy. Just the 2 of us. Reconnect." He leaned in to kiss my cheek. I held my breath. Underneath his expensive cedarwood cologne, I smelled it. The cloying, sweet scent of jasmine and vanilla. It was Delilah's perfume. It was fresh on his collar. "That sounds lovely, Ethan." I lied. He went upstairs to change. His phone, the main one, lit up on the counter. I glanced at it. A message from Delilah flashed on the screen. Do it tomorrow night. Don't hesitate. The trip to Italy was a lie. The wine was a distraction. He was not trying to save the marriage. He was keeping me calm so I would not notice the knife coming for my back. He needed me compliant until the Q3 upload window closed. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I pulled out my burner phone and texted Sloan. It happens tomorrow night. I wrote, if I do not check in with you by midnight, send the index to the Kestrel Arc Internal Ethics Hotline. I had set a dead man's switch. If Ethan tried to silence me, the truth would scream for me. The notification on my phone screen was still glowing. 12 words. The end of a marriage delivered with the same casual cruelty as a spam message. But Ethan had made a critical error in his timing. He had been so focused on coordinating the lockout of our bank accounts that he had forgotten the other window open on his life. On the laptop screen in front of me, the secure upload portal for the Kestrel Arc Board of Directors was active. The system was waiting for the Q3 financial results. The status bar blinked green. Session active. I did not hesitate. I opened a new email draft. In the recipient field, I typed the distribution list for the entire board of directors. Then I added the external auditors at Red Hollow Assurance. Finally, I CC'd the internal anonymous ethics hotline. I did not write a long, tearful explanation. I simply attached 2 files. The first was a PDF named Q3 Index Row Ledger Irregularities. The second was a compressed zip folder containing 24 months of bank statements, the invoices from the Florida resort, and the photos of the burner phone. I named this file Supporting Evidence Do Not Delete. I pressed send. Then, I picked up my phone. I looked at Ethan's text again. I am not returning. We are done. My attorney will call you. I typed my reply. I needed exactly 7 words. I understand. Enjoy your night. Open this. I attached a copy of the index, renamed as Personal Photos, PDF, so his phone would not automatically flag it as a business document. I watched the progress bar slide across the screen. Delivered. The room was silent for exactly 30 seconds. Then, the world outside this kitchen exploded. It started with a push notification from a MarketWatch app. Alert Kestrel Arc LedgerWorks announces emergency closed-door board meeting. The algorithms had picked it up first. The board members must have opened their emails, panic-dialed the other directors, and triggered the automated disclosure system. I refreshed the stock ticker. Kestrel Arc was trading in the after-hours market. The numbers were usually green. Tonight, they turned red. -4%. Refresh. -8%. Refresh. -12%. This was not a rumor. This was a free fall. The high-frequency trading bots had detected a massive risk factor, likely the involvement of the auditors, and they were dumping the stock before the humans even understood what was happening. My phone began to vibrate. It was Ethan. I let it ring. He called again. And again. The screen lit up the dark kitchen like a strobe light. Then came the texts. The cool, detached tone of his breakup message was gone. Answer the phone. Camille, what did you send them? Hand over the devices. Stop communicating. I will sue you for $50 million. I did not smile. I did not pour myself a drink to celebrate. I simply closed the laptop and took a sip of water. My hands were perfectly steady. I looked at the checklist I had written on a notepad. Step 1, secure the data. Step 2, distribute the data. Step 3, survive the backlash. A new email chimed on my personal tablet. It was from a law firm, marked urgent. Cease and desist order regarding Kestrel Arc proprietary information. I opened it. It was a terrifying document, filled with threats of imprisonment and financial ruin. It accused me of stealing trade secrets and violating spousal confidentiality. It looked intimidating. But I am a risk control specialist. I do not just read the text, I read the properties. I right-clicked on the document and opened the metadata inspector. Author Whitmore and Klein Legal Team. Date created February 14th. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This was not a reaction to my email tonight. This document had been drafted on Valentine's Day. Ethan had not just decided to leave me. He had spent the last 8 months building a legal trap to frame me as a thief the moment he filed for divorce. He had planned to destroy me. I had just pulled the trigger first. I looked at the phone, buzzing with another desperate call from the man who had slept beside me for 20 years. "You are too late." "Ethan," I whispered to the empty room, "you are so late." The sun had not yet fully risen when the counterattack began. It did not start with a lawyer serving papers. It started with a push notification from a popular tech blog. The headline screamed across my tablet screen in bold black letters: "Sabotage in the C-suite unstable spouse. Targets Kestrel Arc valuation." I clicked the link. The article cited a source close to the Rowe family, who claimed that my actions the previous night were not those of a whistleblower, but of a woman suffering from a severe mental health crisis. It painted me as paranoid, vindictive, and detached from reality. I tried to log into my LinkedIn account to check my messages. A red banner appeared. "Account suspended pending identity verification due to unusual activity." I checked my Instagram. Locked. My Facebook. Suspended. In the span of 4 hours, I had been systematically erased from the internet. Ethan was not just divorcing me, he was unpersoning me. I turned on the television in the kitchen. There he was. Ethan sat on the morning business news, looking haggard and heartbroken. He was not wearing his usual sharp navy suit. He wore a soft gray sweater, sleeves pushed up, projecting vulnerability. "It is a tragedy," Ethan said to the anchor, his voice thick with manufactured grief. "We are dealing with a very difficult mental health situation at home. I tried to keep it private for the sake of our children, but when that instability threatens the livelihoods of my employees, I have to draw a line." I stared at the screen. He was pivoting the narrative. I was no longer the accuser. I was the liability. I walked to the window. A black sedan was parked 3 houses down. The engine was running, sending puffs of white exhaust into the cold morning air. It was not moving. It was just sitting there, watching. The doorbell rang. It was not a neighbor. It was a courier holding a thick envelope. "Service for Camille Hartwell," he said, avoiding eye contact. I took the envelope. It was a preservation demand. The language was dense and threatening. It stated that Kestrel Arc was investigating the theft of proprietary trade secrets, and that if I deleted a single email, text message, or file, I would be liable for spoliation of evidence. They were setting the trap. If I kept the data, I was a thief. If I deleted it, I was guilty of a cover-up. My phone buzzed. It was Sloane. "Get your things," she said. "Do not answer the door again. I am moving you to a temporary apartment uptown. That car outside is private security. They are trying to rattle you. He is calling me crazy on national television. Sloane," I said, my hand gripping the counter. He is making me into a villain. Stop watching it," Sloane commanded. "Pack a bag. 10 minutes." I was zipping my suitcase when my phone rang again. The caller ID made my stomach drop. It was Madison. I answered immediately. "Maddie, honey. Are you okay?" "Mom." Her voice was small, trembling. "Dad just called me. He said you were having a breakdown. He said he needed to send a car to pick me up from campus because you might try to hurt yourself." Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my chest. He was using our daughter. He was weaponizing her fear. "Madison." "Listen to me," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the shaking in my hands. "I am not having a breakdown. I am perfectly fine. Your father is lying to you because he is in trouble. Do not get in that car. Do you hear me? Do not let anyone take you anywhere." "I'm scared." "Mom," she whispered. He sounded so convincing. "I know," I said. "He is very good at that. Stay in your dorm. Lock the door. I will call you when I am safe. I promise. I hung up as Sloane's car pulled into the driveway. I ran out the back door, ducking low to avoid the line of sight of the black sedan. We sat in the back of Sloane's car as she navigated through the city traffic. She handed me her tablet. "You need to see this," she said. "It just dropped on a financial leaks forum." I looked at the screen. It was a registration document for a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The company was named Hartwell Holdings. My eyes scanned down to the signature line. It was my signature. The loops on the C, the sharp cross on the T. It looked exactly like my handwriting, and listed right next to it, under the title of Managing Director, was my name. "He didn't just hide money," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Oh my God. "He put it in my name. It is a setup," Sloane said grimly. "He is going to claim he didn't steal the money. He is going to claim you did." The interview room at the federal building was designed to make people feel small. It was a windowless box with gray walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, and air conditioning set to a temperature that kept my skin prickling. There were no handcuffs and no bad cop shouting. It was just a quiet room and two agents with binders full of data. Agent Miller slid a graph across the table. It showed the stock performance of Kestralark over the last 48 hours. A sharp red line plummeted straight down. "Mrs. Rowe, 3 days before you sent that email to the board, a massive short position was opened against Kestralark stock," Miller said, his voice flat. "It was routed through a shell company in the Caribbean. The moment the stock crashed, that account made over $12 million. The account is registered to Hartwell Holdings. That is you." He tapped the name on the paper. "They thought I had crashed the company to cash out. I did not touch the paper." I looked at Sloane. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single notarized document. "This is an affidavit from Mrs. Rowe's broker," Sloane said, her tone sharp as a razor. "It confirms that Mrs. Rowe placed a total freeze on all her personal trading accounts 5 days ago. She has not executed a trade, bought an option, or moved a single cent into any offshore entity. If there is a short position, it was not funded by her." I leaned forward. I placed my own binder on the table. It was my chain of custody log. "I am a risk control specialist. Agent Miller." I said, "I do not gamble. I document. This binder contains the metadata of every file I accessed. It shows the exact time I found the offshore documents on my husband's hidden drive. It shows that I have never logged into that Caribbean portal. I did not short the stock. I exposed the fraud that was inflating it." Miller looked at the binder, then at me. The narrative was shifting. I was not the panicked housewife or the greedy ex-wife. I was the professional. The dynamic of the investigation changed entirely 2 hours later. We were leaving the building when Sloane's phone rang. She listened for a moment, her eyes widening, then hung up. "We need to go to my office," she said. "Nolan Price just walked into the lobby. He wants to talk." Nolan Price, the CFO of Kestralark and Ethan's right hand for a decade, sat in Sloane's conference room. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. His tie was loose, and he was shaking. He is going to feed me to the wolves, Camille," Nolan said, his voice cracking. "Ethan told the board this morning that the offshore accounts were my unauthorized side project. He said he was shocked." Shocked. "Tell us about Hartwell Holdings," I said. "It wasn't me," Nolan said, pulling a stack of printed emails from his jacket pocket. "And it wasn't just Ethan. It was Delilah." "Delilah Knox," Sloane asked. "She isn't just his mistress," Nolan said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "She is a forensic accountant, a fixer. Ethan hired her 3 years ago to build a structure that could hide the losses from the failed crypto expansion. She designed the offshore loop. She called it the Hartwell Protocol because they needed a clean name to put on the paperwork." He slid the emails across the polished wood table. I picked up the top sheet. It was an email from Ethan to Nolan, dated 4 months ago. We need the Q3 numbers to look like growth at all costs. Activate the Hartwell entities. Use Camille's old passport scan for the KYC checks. She never checks her credit report. Just get it done. I felt the blood drain from my face. He ordered it. I whispered. He explicitly ordered you to frame me. I have more, Nolan said. I have the original incorporation documents they forged. He handed me a copy of the deed for the offshore company. I stared at the signature at the bottom. Camille Hartwell. To a stranger, it looked perfect. But I knew how I wrote. I looked closely at the loop of the L and the cross of the T. This is wrong, I said. When I sign my name, I lift the pen between the first and last name. This signature. It flows continuously. The angle is 12 degrees too sharp. It was done by a machine, or someone tracing a sample without understanding the muscle memory. I looked up at Sloane, and then at Nolan. The horror was not that he had done it. The horror was the date on the document. Nolan, I said, my voice trembling with rage. This document is dated 2 years ago. Nolan nodded, looking down at his hands. Yes, he set it up back then, just in case. I sat back in the chair. The room spun slightly. This was not a reaction to our divorce. Ethan had not framed me because I threatened to expose him this week. He had stolen my identity 2 years ago. He had built a trapdoor under my feet while we were still planning vacations and celebrating birthdays. He didn't just want a divorce, I said, realizing the depth of the monster I had married. He needed a scapegoat for when the bubble burst. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his insurance policy. The conference room at Whitmore and Klein was not designed for negotiation. It was designed for intimidation. The walls were a blinding, clinical white, and the air conditioning was set so low that it felt less like a law office and more like a meat locker. I sat on one side of the mahogany table, my hands folded on top of my binder. Sloane sat next to me, checking her watch. Across from us, Ethan sat flanked by his lead counsel, a man named Sterling who wore a suit that probably cost more than my first car. They slid a document toward me. It was thick, bound in heavy paper. We are calling this the Amicable Resolution Package, Sterling said, his voice smooth and oily. Ethan is prepared to offer you a lump sum of $5 million, plus the deed to the vacation home in Aspen. Full ownership. No contest. I flipped the page to the terms and conditions. I did not look at the dollar signs. I looked at the clauses in fine print. Non-disparagement. Withdrawal of all prior complaints. Admission of filing errors due to temporary emotional distress. They were paying me to say I was crazy. Ethan leaned forward. He rested his elbows on the table and looked me in the eye, using the soft, intimate gaze that had worked on me for 2 decades. Cammy, look at me, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Please, this has gone too far. I know you are hurt. I know you are confused. But take the money. Go to Aspen. Rest. Let me fix the mess you made with the board. We can still protect the family name. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the slight tremor in his left eyelid. He was not worried about me. He was terrified of what was in my binder. I am not confused. Ethan, I said, my voice steady, and I do not want your money. I signaled to Sloane. She pulled a single sheet of paper from our file. We called it Exhibit R. She slid it across the table, right over their settlement offer. This is a metadata analysis of the digital signature on the Hartwell Holdings Incorporation documents. I said, the signature was applied at 3 p.m. on November 12th, 2 years ago. The IP address traces back to a hardwired desktop computer in the executive suite of Kestralark. Specifically, your office. Ethan froze. On that day and at that time, I continued, I was at a dental appointment in Connecticut. I have the billing record, the parking receipt, and a sworn affidavit from the hygienist. I could not have signed that document. Ethan, you forged it. You committed identity theft and wire fraud from your work computer. Sterling let out a scoff, waving his hand dismissively. Mrs. Rowe, with all due respect, you do not understand high finance. These structures are complex. IP addresses can be rerouted. You are grasping at straws. I turned my gaze to the lawyer. I do not need to understand the speech, I said, my tone sharpening. I understand the footprints. And you left a muddy one right on the carpet. Sloane smiled then. It was a shark's smile. She tapped the settlement agreement they had just handed us. Speaking of footprints, Sloane said, Mr. Sterling, when you sent over the draft of this agreement last night, your paralegal forgot to scrub the track changes history. We can see the comments you made in the sidebar. Sterling's face went pale. He snatched the document back, but it was too late. Comment number 4. Sloane recited from memory, and I quote, get her to sign before Friday. Before the agencies get the server logs from Delilah. End quote. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Sloane leaned in. Here is the new deal. You are going to draft a new affidavit. In it, Ethan will admit that the offshore signature is a forgery and that Camille had no knowledge of the accounts. You will sign it now. If you do not, I have an FBI agent waiting in the lobby downstairs. I will walk this metadata analysis and your unscrubbed contract comments down to him personally. Ethan's face changed. The mask of the concerned husband dissolved. The face of the visionary CEO vanished. What was left was a cornered animal. He slammed his hand on the table. You ungrateful, Ethan stammered. His teeth grit together. I built everything. Do you have any idea what you are doing? You are destroying Madison's future. If I go down, if the stock goes to zero, there is nothing left for her. You are selfish. You are a cancer to this family. I am not the cancer. Ethan, I said, watching him unravel. I was the immune system, and you just killed the host. Before he could scream again, a sound cut through the tension. It was a vibration, then a chime. It came from Ethan's phone, then Sterling's phone, then the paralegal's tablet. Every device on their side of the table lit up simultaneously. Ethan looked down at his screen. His face went gray. It was an internal alert from Kestrel Arc. Emergency Board Resolution Section 4. Invoked. Effective. Immediately, CEO Ethan Rowe is to surrender all company devices. Security is en route to secure the premises. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. It looks like you do not have to worry about the stock anymore. Ethan, I said, it is no longer your problem. The collapse of Ethan's empire did not happen in months or weeks. It happened in minutes. The NASDAQ exchange issued a T1 halt on Kestrel Arc stock, suspending all trading due to news pending. That news was a press release from the board of directors stating that Ethan Rowe had been relieved of his duties as CEO effective immediately, pending the results of an internal forensic audit. In the sterile conference room, Ethan was still trying to shout his way out of the trap. He turned on his lawyer, his face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. It was Nolan, Ethan screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the empty chair where his CFO should have been. Nolan Price cooked the books I had no idea about the offshore accounts. You tell the board that Nolan is the rogue actor here. Sloane looked up from her tablet, her expression bored. Actually, Ethan, Sloane said, her voice cutting through his panic. Nolan Price signed a cooperation agreement with the Securities and Exchange Commission 45 minutes ago. He handed over an email chain where you threatened to fire him if he did not. And I quote, make the revenue chart point up by any means necessary. He didn't just give them the emails. He gave them the voice memos you sent him on Signal. Ethan slumped back into his chair, the air leaving his lungs in a wheezing gasp. But the worst news was yet to come. My phone buzzed with an update from a contact Sloane had in federal law enforcement. Delilah Knox was just stopped at JFK International Airport, I said, reading the text aloud. She was trying to board a flight to a country with no extradition treaty. She had a one-way ticket. She was scared, Ethan muttered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. She was running. No, Ethan, I corrected him. She wasn't running from the law. She was running to sell you out. Customs agents had found 3 encrypted hard drives in her carry-on luggage, along with a handwritten notebook containing the routing codes for the shell companies. But the real twist was in her chat logs, which the agents were already decrypting. Delilah hadn't just been his mistress and his co-conspirator. She had been keeping a detailed diary of every crime he committed, time-stamped and backed up, intending to use it as leverage to blackmail him for a golden parachute. She was never his partner. She was a parasite waiting for the host to weaken. She told me she loved me, Ethan whispered, staring at the table. She said we were a team. You hired a shark. I said, don't be surprised when she bites. The room grew quiet as the reality set in. Outside, the machinery of public relations was grinding to a halt. The crisis management firm Ethan had paid $20,000 a month to destroy my reputation suddenly went dark. They pulled the bot farms. They deleted the smear articles. They realized that defending a CEO under federal investigation for fraud would make them accomplices to obstruction of justice. They cut the line to save themselves. My personal phone began to ping. It was a message from the chairwoman of the charity gala board, a woman who had blocked my number yesterday. Camille, darling, I just heard the terrible news about Ethan. I always knew something was off with him. Are you free for lunch next week? We must support each other. I deleted the message without replying. They were not texting because they cared. They were texting because they could smell the blood in the water, and they wanted to make sure they were standing next to the survivor, not the casualty. 2 security guards entered the conference room. They were men Ethan had hired. They wore uniforms with the company logo he had designed. Mr. Rowe, the lead guard said, his voice devoid of deference. We need your badge and your building pass. Ethan stood up, his hand going instinctively to his lapel. He unclipped the plastic rectangle that had been his identity for 20 years. He handed it over. The guard tapped it against his handheld scanner. Access denied. The beep was loud and final. It was the same sound I heard when my credit card was declined at the grocery store 2 days ago. The irony was perfect. He had tried to lock me out of my life, but he had only succeeded in locking himself out of his own creation. I looked at him, stripped of his title, his mistress, and his access. I realized then that my email the night before was just the spark. I did not destroy Kestralark. The structure was already rotten, eaten away by his greed and arrogance. I just opened the door so the wind could blow it down. But Ethan was not done. He was a narcissist, and narcissists do not die quietly. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing, the panic replaced by a cold, desperate malice. You think you won, Ethan hissed, leaning across the table one last time. I am going to walk out to those cameras in the lobby, and I am going to tell them that I gave you those passwords. I am going to tell them that we planned this together, that you are the mastermind who stole the trade secrets to blackmail the board. That is a lie, Sloane said sharply. It doesn't matter if it is a lie, Ethan shouted, his voice cracking. It will take them years to prove it. I will drag you down into the mud with me. Camille, I will make sure every headline says Rowe couple indicted, unless you tell them this was all a misunderstanding. Right now. He was holding the detonator to a suicide vest. He was willing to destroy what was left of his own life just to ensure I did not walk away clean. The air in the conference room at Whitmore and Klein was no longer cold. It was suffocating. The silence stretched until it felt like a physical weight pressing down on the mahogany table. I pushed a single document toward Ethan. It was an affidavit. This is non-negotiable, I said, my voice flat. You will sign this statement admitting that the signature on the offshore incorporation documents is a forgery created without my knowledge, and you will issue a public retraction of your comments regarding my mental health. Sterling, his lawyer, leaned in, his forehead glistening with sweat. We cannot sign this today. We need time to review the implications for Mr. Rowe's pending criminal liability. If he admits to forgery, he hands the prosecution a confession on a silver platter. He does not have time. Sloane cut in, tapping the face of her watch. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is currently in the lobby. They are waiting for the metadata logs. Every minute you stall is another minute added to an obstruction of justice charge. Ethan slammed his fist onto the table, the vibration rattling the water glasses. "What do you want from me?" he screamed, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "You took the company. You took my reputation. You took everything. What more do you want?" I looked him dead in the eye. I did not blink. "I want my name back," I said softly. "I want it out of your crimes. I want it scrubbed from your dirty ledgers. I want to walk out of here as Camille Hartwell, not the scapegoat for your greed." Sloane slid a second document across the table. "We have calculated the settlement based on the asset valuation from 3 days ago," Sloane explained. "Before the crash. We are taking the liquidity, the real estate, and the bond portfolio. You can keep the Kestrel Arc stock. Camille does not want to eat the corpse. She just wants the right to live." Ethan laughed, a dry, jagged sound. "I won't sign. If I go down, you come with me. I will tell the press you were the mastermind. I will tell them you can't." I interrupted him. I placed my phone on the table, screen down. "There is a scheduled email on a secure server." I said, "It is not on this phone. It is not on my laptop. It is in a cloud account that I cannot access from here. It is set to send a full compliance report to the Internal Ethics Hotline and 3 major news outlets in exactly 10 minutes. It outlines the specific dates you ordered the forgery." Ethan stared at me, his mouth slightly open. "If you sign the affidavit and clear my name." I continued, "I will call the server host and cancel the broadcast. If you try to drag me down, the email goes out, and you lose the only leverage you have left for a plea deal. You cannot threaten me to delete it, Ethan, because I am not the one holding the trigger anymore. Time is—" He looked at Sterling. Sterling looked at the floor. There was no way out. The walls had closed in. Ethan picked up the heavy Montblanc pen. His hand shook so violently that the tip scratched the paper before he even began to write. He signed. He did not do it because he was sorry. He did it because he was a drowning man, realizing that holding on to my ankle would not keep him afloat. As soon as he capped the pen, his personal phone rang. He answered it on speaker. "Mr. Rowe." The voice of the company's general counsel boomed through the room. "We have received a federal warrant. You are to surrender your laptop and your passport immediately. Security is coming up to the conference room now. Do not leave the building." Ethan dropped the phone. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. He was fully locked out. I stood up. I did not smile. I did not feel a surge of triumph like they show in the movies. I just felt my lungs expand. For the first time in 20 years, I was breathing air that wasn't recycled. I walked out of the office building and onto the busy street. The city noise washed over me: sirens, chatter, traffic. It sounded like music. I pulled my phone from my pocket. A calendar notification popped up. Anniversary dinner, 7:30 p.m. I swiped left and hit delete. I opened the message thread with Ethan. I looked at those 12 words one last time. I did not delete them. I archived them. They were just data now, a sample of a risk that had been neutralized. I raised my hand and hailed a yellow cab. I slid into the back seat. "Where to?" "Lady," the driver asked. I looked out the window as the ticker on a building across the street flashed the news: Kestrel Arc shares crash amid governance probe. The stock hadn't collapsed because I hated him. It collapsed because the truth is a heavy thing, and it finally landed, forward. I said to the driver, "Just forward. Thank you so much for listening to this story." I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below, sharing your city or country. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more listeners. Your support means the world to me.